Welcome to the Midnight Writers Podcast, helping authors become better writers.
Episode 7, Writing Conferences. This is John.
This is Lena.
And we have with us again author Kevin Eikenberry.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. It's been a fun few episodes.
I agree. This was a lot of fun.
So, along with different conventions that we've been talking about, there's also writing conferences, which are different. I've never gone to a writing conference yet because they usually cost way more money. So, how is a writing conference different than a convention?
Most of the time, writing conferences are more nuts and bolts. You know, they're focused a lot on craft, a lot on the business aspects, and then writing conferences typically have unique opportunities for you to sit down with agents or editors, opportunities to have your work critiqued, either in private or in big group settings where you can either be known or you can be unknown in the audience listening to them go through your stuff. So they're fairly intense. It's a very different experience as a writer going into one of those conferences because you're always told you got to be on 24/7. You never know who you're going to be in an elevator with. And, I was in an elevator with Donald Moss one time from the Moss Literary Agency, and I didn't even realize it until it was too late. It was like, oh yeah, there he went. So yeah, it's an intense environment, but I think they are completely worth it, especially if you can work with a conference. And, I know that there are some that offer scholarship programs and others that offer, discounted tuitions to go and work on their technological teams and stuff like that. So if there's a way that you can get to a writing conference, there are really good ones out there.
Yeah, it goes volunteer, I guess.
Yeah, volunteering. Volunteering is another way to do it as well.
It's like, I'm just going to stay down here and make sure everyone has their drinks and they're good.
And don't mind me while I pull out a notebook.
That's why they make video or digital recorders.
Yeah, right. Well, it sounds like the reason that it's so expensive is you actually have some really key opportunities to actually, grab people who are in publishing and agents and all those, which you don't necessarily get at the conventions.
You can, yeah. And depending upon the different conference or seminar that you go to, a lot of them have different focuses. Like, for example, the Pikes Peak Writers Conference that comes up in April is very much for the aspiring writer, and it talks a lot about, there's a lot of craft, there's a lot of critique opportunities, but then there's still the capability to sit down with agents and editors and, go through a pitch session. And, if you get an agent or an editor say, hey, yeah, send me the whole manuscript, that's a really good thing to come out of a conference with. But in a lot of cases, just the opportunity to sit down with them at a lunch or a dinner meal at their table and talk is more beneficial than anything else that you'll have the opportunity to do. It's a little bit of networking.
It's always fun getting to talk with authors and stars and other people you see as famous. But we one time with the Star Trek group had a meal with what was the guy that played the Eddie Munster?
Oh, I can't remember his name.
Butch Patrick.
Yeah.
So we I got an opportunity to go to dinner with Butch Patrick and a couple other people, and that was just amazing. Just getting to hearing some of his life experiences and some of the behind the scenes things for what we've seen in TV and stuff. So yeah, I've seen those the Superstars Writing Conference. They have the meal option for $150 more. You can have dinner with so and
With Andre.
That looks really cool.
and it is with Superstars. I love Superstars. I was the first time I heard about it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, and Kevin J. Anderson had talked to me about it and said it was something I needed to go to. And yeah, the cost was a little bit high. I mean, the first time you go to a conference, that particular one, it's fairly expensive. Once you go, you get the alumni rate for the rest of your life, and that's a significant difference. But the first time, yeah, I mean, I had no idea what I was doing with writing. I'd written some short fiction. I was trying to play with novels and trying to really get an idea of what the business was. And I actually I'll make no excuse. I talked to my dad and said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And Dad said, "Yeah, I'll throw in some money for it for you." And so we paid for my tuition to go to Superstars. And in that particular seminar, it's basically all about the business of writing. Coming up next year, we're actually going to add a craft day, but Superstars makes its money in the business of writing. And in my particular case, the first year I went, the very first presentation after the welcome one was Eric Flint from Bain Books on contract dissection. And that 1 hour block of teaching on contracts and how to dissect it and really get an idea of what a publisher wants paid for my seminar, because not 6 months later, I had a contract offer on Sleeper Protocol that was a bad contract, and I had to turn it down and walk away.
Wow.
And so I look at that experience, having paid for my experience for Superstars probably for life, because I wasn't locked into a bad deal just because it was, hey, somebody wants to publish my book. So Superstars, yeah, very, very near and dear to my heart. I love the focus of that one. And I like Pikes Peak Writers because of the opportunities it does give you well outside your norms.
Cool.
What other conferences are there besides the Superstars and Pikes Peak?
There are a ton. Out here in our area, you've got Castle Rock Writers has a conference that they do. It's typically every fall, like October, November timeframe. Then you've got the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers Group. They do their, it's Colorado Gold, I think is the name of the conference. That's a big one. That's where they discuss things like the Colorado Book Award and other things. I know there's some other ones that are smaller, more sub-regional, if you will. But I mean, really, all you got to do is go into Google and type in writing conferences, and you will find there are a ton of them all over the world. And there's even some that there's one called Sail to Success, where they actually go on a cruise. And you go on a cruise for 3 or 4 days to the Bahamas or Bermuda, something fairly short. But again, you have that opportunity to have a very closed audience and a lot of face time with people.
The Writing Excuses podcast, they started doing a cruise last year.
Yep.
So it was $1,200 for the conference, and you got a free cruise out of it.
Yeah.
Plus all the knowledge.
Yeah.
They're dropped with you. They can't escape.
Yeah, exactly.
Who would want to?
Man overboard again.
Yeah, but have the opportunity to sit down with people is again, it's like networking at conventions, but at conferences, there's some other players there that you don't necessarily have at conventions.
Yeah, it sounds like it's getting a chance to meet some of the agents. Even if those agents don't represent you, they can at least point you in the right direction and stuff. So,
and most of the time, agents, editors, fellow authors, no matter if they're best-selling authors or folks that are just starting out, everybody is genuinely wanting to help you. And you can ask questions of anybody, and most of the time they're going to sit down with you and, hey, let's talk about that. I look at watching people gathering around Jeffrey Deaver a few years ago at the Pikes Peak Writers Conference, and he just sat and talked and had a great time for a couple hours at least, talking about BarCons and that sort of thing. There's lots of opportunities, and everybody just is wanting to be there and wanting to talk about writing and genuinely wants to help.
So at what point in your career should you consider going to a writing conference and putting out that kind of money for one?
Well, it depends. I think that you're going to know when your time is right. When you've been serious about it long enough and people are telling you that, hey, you need to try to take the next step. What are the things that you need to try to do? And then you go back and you address, or you take a look at what conference is going to be best for you. If you're writing really well and people are saying that there's a lot of good stuff about your work, going to a conference that's focused mainly just on beginning writers and craft development is probably not what you want to do. So then looking at a conference like Pikes Peak, where it has that element, but also has the professional focused kind of tracking where you've got the opportunities to sit down with agents and editors, that can help you kind of gauge where you're at. And then when you reached a point where you're at a higher level, there's higher level writing conferences like Clarion West that are very expensive and multi-week, but those are opportunities for you to go and develop your craft even more. And so then something like Superstars is it's in a different genre, basically, if you will, with talking about the business of writing. So even if you're in self-publishing and you're starting to put your own work out there, you learn a lot through Superstars about different ways to format your book. There's always representatives there from Kobo that are always talking about self-publishing and how to do things better. So it's kind of doing your homework about the conference and figuring out what you want to do, and then making your choice based off of that. I mean, you could, if you wanted to and you had unlimited funds, you hit the lottery tomorrow, you could probably go to a writing conference every weekend for a year, all over the country, all over the world if you wanted to. You really just got to do your homework and figure out which one's going to be the right one for you.
How much do they typically cost? I know we mentioned the Writing Excuses one is like $1,200, but that's with the cruise. Like, what what's the ballpark that you might be shelling out for these things?
I've seen them for in the $200 and $300 range, and all the way up to thousands of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
So it just kind of it depends.
yeah, it's going to depend on the conference. And again, talking about things like the Clarion and Clarion West, you've got multi-week. I think they even maybe like 6 or 8 weeks long.
Oh wow.
I mean, you're talking lots of money that's involved.
It's like boot camp,
Yeah, kind of.
except they don't pay for your food and lodging.
Yeah, and nobody's yelling at you or throwing trash cans down the bay. So
You're in the mud a lot, though.
So yeah, it's just do your homework, and you can figure out which ones are going to be the right ones for you. And then the ultimate step is take the plunge.
Right.
Awesome.
Do you have any cool stories from the conferences you want to share?
Yeah, John, you mentioned Superstars and the VIP dinner. I did the VIP dinner twice. The first year I sat with Eric Flint, which Eric is an amazing guy to talk with. Just he's so knowledgeable about not just the business, but he's a very astute historian and has a lot of great stories and really gets down into the weeds on things, which is a lot of fun to discuss. And we were sitting at dinner, and he was talking about, I think the question from one of the folks at the table was, how did you get into writing alternate histories, and what's the draw to that for you? And he said, oh yeah, this is kind of how I came up with the idea for the whole 1632 universe. And he's talking about different things and weaving in the historical events just effortlessly. And I'm sitting there, and my mind is turning, and I'd had an idea for an alternate history a long time ago, but I'd never done anything with it because I typically don't read alternate histories. It's not something that I've kind of gravitated towards. But then I made a note, on my little napkin there at dinner. Always take notes, right? Mm-hmm. I made a note about it and thought, it's something I might just have to revisit. So after the dinner's over, we're standing there getting ready to leave the restaurant. And I looked at Eric and I said, I've had an idea for an alternate history for a while, and I've never done anything about it. Would you look at it at some time if I just wrote up like a 2 or 3 page synopsis of what the idea is? And he looked at me and said, let's go to lunch tomorrow. And so I went, sat down one-on-one at lunch with Eric Flint, and I told him what the idea was, and he kind of gave me the nod, said, I really like that. You need to write that. And it's one of the things that's on my to-do shelf, hopefully sooner rather than later. But, I've had the opportunity now with the last couple Superstars to actually talk about it. And it, maybe something that will reach fruition. Who knows?
Yeah.
So it takes you a long time to develop those stories, huh?
Well, in this one in particular, the other part of it is, I did write 2 books in the meantime.
You're not sitting around doing nothing. Yeah.
And quite honestly, with an alternate history, the level of detail you've got to get into, it can be daunting. And so there's a lot of research that's involved. And, and I'm dealing with a particularly, fairly modern historical event, and what could possibly change from that. But then what you've got to go through is kind of the drop in the puddle. So your event in an alternate history is the pebble that hits the water. And then every ripple that comes out are different things that you may not have thought about, and things that would actually change because of what happened with the event. So, you're looking at political things, socioeconomic themes, all kinds of different things, and you really have to wrap your head around that big picture, and it's daunting. It really is, especially if you've never done it before.
I think I'll stick to the short story then.
Yeah, I love the alternate history. That the idea of it is just having to dig in and sit down and force myself. Mm-hmm. Okay,
it's like world
I have
building.
to do this.
Oh yeah,
it's world building to the extreme. Once you've got a handle on world building, and you don't have to. I'm not one of those people that thinks you have to build your world ahead of time. I think you can build it as you write.
Yeah.
But in an environment like that, where you're talking about a historical event that there's actual climatic records for. So if you say, it was sunny and warm, somebody's going to call you on and say, no, on that particular day in history, it was snowy and 40 degrees. You've got to be down to that kind of detail, which is, like I said, it's daunting and challenging, but there's a lot of fun to it as well. Once you can get past that and just kind of write.
Sounds like we should just go and burn down the Hall of Records. Problem solved.
What records?
It would make alternate history a lot easier to write, yeah. So yeah, but conferences definitely provide you the opportunity to have those special moments where you have an opportunity. Again, you're riding in an elevator with someone, or you're sitting at BarCon and somebody sits down next to you at the couch. You never know who's gonna sit down with you or strike up a conversation, and those are the kinds of things that can change your life.
Wow. I need to go.
Yeah. Sounds like some of the key though is, especially with, as we said before, a lot of us are introverts. Going to these things really would break you out of your shell, because you gotta be forward. You gotta be connecting with people, and so just like, oh, they'll come to me. It's like, nope, you gotta show some initiative.
You have to, and it's, again, you're dealing with your own introverted tendencies, but you've also got chances are 90% of the people there have the same kind of things, and all of them go through the same challenges where, you have to walk up to somebody and introduce yourself. And I'm no different than everybody else. Here's an opportunity. There's somebody I really wanted to talk to at this whole conference, and they're standing there at the counter waiting for their Starbucks. There's nobody else in line. Do I go up and say something? And yeah, the first several times, nope. I chickened out.
Just
then
Instagram it. Yeah.
And then finally, it's like, you know what? I'm going to go up and I'm going to have a conversation.
What do you have to lose?
Yeah, exactly. You have nothing to lose, and that makes it a lot easier to go up the next time and the next time and the next time.
I feel like I screwed up when Jim Butcher was here, and I may have fanboyed a bit when I rode the elevator with him.
I rode the elevator with him at Cosine, and I was making jokes.
At least you didn't get hot coffee in your face from that Starbucks, right?
All right. Any final comments or questions about writing conferences?
I had one question that I've been sitting on for a little bit. Okay, I'm thinking about going to a conference. What do I need to get ready? Mentally, what do I have to have with me? What should I have had done? I'm sure obviously you have to have something written, but do you have a query letter? Do you carry copies around? Like what do you need to really make it at a conference?
Depending upon the conference, again, you're kind of going back to doing your homework. Let's say it's something like Pikes Peak, where you've got the opportunity with agents and editors. Have a business card. Number one, always have a business card. If you've got a website, make sure your website is up to date, looks good. So if they actually look at your business card and see that, they can jump on there and check out your website, check out your web presence. I have carried query letters. I've carried little one sheets about the book or the particular universe, if I want to talk about multi-books or whatever else. Most of the time, I will tell you, I've never had to pull those out because you're involved in a conversation most of the time. And if you stop and open up your binder and get your little piece of paper out.
It's not like a job interview.
Yeah, it's not a job interview. And part of that, when you're talking with an agent or an editor, they're kind of interviewing you along the way. And so if you have to kind of reach for your crutch a little bit, it's not, I don't think it's going to hurt you, but it's going to take you down a notch or two in their eyes, in my opinion. And I think that, if you've got the capability to practice your discussion about your book and talk about what it's about, you've got your log line or your high concept or all the different things that people tell you what to do, just know what you need to know about that particular book or what your goal out of that conversation is, and steer the conversation towards it.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to the Midnight Writers Podcast. If you've enjoyed this content, sign up for our newsletter on our website, midnightwriterssociety.com, where you'll get a lot more great information. See you next Wednesday.